Good afternoon, and welcome to the webinar for the Fiscal Year 2020 competition under the American Overseas Research Centers Program. This is Cheryl Gibbs presenting the webinar. I am the Senior Director of the International and Foreign Language Education Office at the U.S. Department of Education, and proudly I've also been the Program Manager for the American Overseas Research Centers Program for well over 20 years. So it is my pleasure to present this webinar, and I encourage you to listen to it carefully and to take down notes and questions that you would like to raise at the conclusion of the webinar. Just to confirm that you are listening to the webinar for the American Overseas Research Centers Program, Education Opportunity Number, ED-grants-0211200-001. I'm presenting this webinar pulling key highlights from the notice inviting applications because the notice is the official document that announces the competition and gives the most critical, vital information that governs the competition. So the AORC notice inviting applications, or the NIA, sets out the purpose of the program. For those that are new to the program, to this competition, and for those who are experienced, let's review the purpose of the program as it is authorized under Section 609 of the Higher Education Act as amended. The purpose of the program is to establish or operate overseas centers to promote postgraduate research, area studies, and exchanges. Now, the purpose of the program mentions to establish or operate, but in all candor, it is very difficult to be competitive under this program if you are intending to use the grant to establish a center. The program awards monies that are not sufficient to really establish a center. It does tend to support established centers that are in operation. So if you are listening to the webinar and you do not have the proper mechanisms in place as far as institutional membership or permanent center overseas, it's going to be quite a challenge to present an application that's going to be competitive for you to establish a center effective in the spring of 2020. So again, the purpose of the program is to establish or operate, and I emphasize operate, a center for the purposes of promoting postgraduate research and area studies and exchanges. Now, the overarching mission of Title VI is to focus on area studies, so it's important for me to give you the definition of area studies. Area studies, according to Title VI, is a program of study of the aspects of a world area, the society or societies, including the study of history, culture, economy, politics, international relations, and languages. So the scope of the Overseas Center should really tie back into the overarching mission of Title VI International Education, which is area studies and language training. But for the purposes of this program, heavily area studies and the scholarly endeavors as it relates to area studies. Eligible applicants under the program are consortia of United States institutions of higher education that receive more than 50% of their funding from public or private U.S. sources. They have a permanent presence in the country in which the center is located and are 501c3 tax-exempt organizations. The "and" is important because you have to have all three of these eligibility components. You have to be a consortia of United States institutions of higher education. I often get calls from prospective applicants asking whether a department at their university is eligible to apply for the program. No, that is not an eligible applicant. You have to be a group of U.S. institutions of higher education, and you have to receive more than 50% of your funding from public or private U.S. sources. You have to have a permanent presence in the country in which the center is located, and you have to be tax exempt under 501c3 of the IRS statute. The allowable activities or costs under the program within Section 609 of the Higher Education Act, which authorizes the American Overseas Research Centers program, there is a menu of allowable costs. They include the cost of operating and maintaining the overseas center, the facilities, the cost of organizing and managing scholarly conferences, the cost for teaching and research materials, the acquisition, maintenance, and preservation of library collections. And this particular allowable cost is rather dated. By library collections, you can expand that cost to mean digital materials, technology. So it's beyond the library hard copy acquisition of materials. So when you think about your library and the resources that your overseas center will offer or have access to, it's much broader than hard copy manuscripts or books. You may develop your budget to include costs to bring visiting scholars and faculty to the center to teach or to conduct research. Faculty, staff, and student stipends and salaries are allowable, and faculty and staff and student travel are also allowable, and the publication and dissemination of materials for the scholarly and general public are allowable costs. And that speaks to the outreach efforts of an overseas center when you talk about materials for the general public, in addition to your scholarly audiences. The notice inviting applications set out 2 invitational priorities. The first one focuses on professional development opportunities for community colleges and minority-serving institutions. I'm going to read the text of that first invitational priority because it's somewhat of a departure from the priorities that we have announced in previous, 4 previous competitions. And that first invitational priority, and invitational means that we would like for you to discuss it in the application, but we are not going to, or the peer reviewers are not going to give points for your discussion of the priority. But it is a nod and a nudge that we would like you to include information about this in the application. So the first invitational priority speaks to providing professional development opportunities to participants from community colleges and minority-serving institutions. And the opportunities must include foreign language instruction at the beginning level to introduce participants to the language of the center, or at the intermediate and advanced levels to strengthen participants' foreign language proficiency. So that particular part of this priority reflects the desires of the administration that they wanted to see in all of the Title VI competitions that IFLE is conducting for fiscal 2020. They wanted to see information in the applications about foreign language instruction and proficiency. Again, I mentioned a moment ago that this is a departure from previous AORC competition notices, but it's something that is doable. I strongly feel that all of the centers can speak to their foreign language capacities to teach a language, to introduce participants to the beginning language of the area of your region where your center is located, or for your advanced scholars that are in country who might need some additional support for their language training to conduct their research, that you can discuss in the application that you have the capability and the resources to provide that kind of instruction at the intermediate level or advanced level to participants. Again, this is not a weighted criterion or priority, I should say, not a criterion. It's not a weighted priority, but we are asking that you discuss it to the extent that you can in your application. Invitational priority number 1 also asks that you discuss curriculum development workshops for incorporating global content into courses, conferences related to the scholarly focus of the center. And the professional development opportunities may be provided in the United States or overseas where the center is located. And the reason that we're allowing you to have that option of providing these professional development opportunities in the United States or overseas is in acknowledgement that of the fact that community colleges, minority-serving institutions do not have the resources to go overseas to have access to what you can provide. So as consortia of U.S. institutions, many of the institutions that comprise your membership are national resource centers, or they have some involvement with international education programs, either through the Fulbright-Hays programs, the other Title VI programs. So there is a venue in the United States where you can use your domestic resources to provide professional development opportunities to community college participants and minority-serving institution participants. So you have that option to do it domestically. And you also have the option of, if you have the resources and can have maybe a fellowship competition for faculty at a minority-serving institution where you would like to have them expose them to a real experience of the culture and of the region where the center is located, again, the option is there for you to offer that opportunity and have them travel to the overseas center to really engage in a real cultural, hands-on experience in the culture by bringing them to the center. So Invitational Priority 1 asks you to discuss your foreign language capacity in training and participants from community colleges and minority-serving institutions, and it also asks that you afford those target groups opportunities for curriculum development workshops, et cetera. So that's invitational priority number 1. The second priority is not new. It was in the previous 2016 competition, and that is open access to center-related research, instructional and scholarly resources. And we are asking that you discuss how your project promotes international scholarship by providing open access to center-related research studies, your conference proceedings, online libraries, digital archives, foreign language instructional materials, scholarly publications, and other resources related to the thematic focus of the center. So we have open access, which is just as it sounds, that you're not having proprietary constraints on what you produce, but the public has open access to what the center produces, what the center teaches, your library materials, and other resources. In the notice inviting application, the award information is critical. The available funds, and I'm very pleased that we were able to increase the available funds for this fiscal year 2020 competition. The available funds is $1 million. So everyone who is submitting an application under the competition, we have in the department $1 million to work with for this competition. Once we have the peer review and can establish who will be funded, we have $1 million to allocate to those successful applicants. The estimated range, average size, and number of awards. So this part of the notice tends to be a little bit confusing. The estimated range of awards, the amount in the notice is taken from 2016, where we looked at, we had fewer dollars, but through budget service, we still have to do a calculation that says, based on what we did before and looking at what's possible for 2020, the estimate range of awards can be as low as $46,000 to $70,000 for each 12-month budget period. That's our estimated range. That is not sending a signal to you as an applicant that you should develop a budget that is as low as $46,000. That's not what we're suggesting. We're just giving you the calculations internally, what that means to us, looking at what we had to work with in the past, what we're looking at now. This could be the average, the range of awards, a low of $46,000 to an upper range of $70,000. The estimated average size of an award can be around $59,000. So if we're looking at a universe of maybe 28 applications that are submitted, and we are hoping and projecting funding 17 or so, if we look at the numbers across all of those budgets that are submitted to us, the estimated average size would probably be $58,000 per year. And the estimated number of awards, we are optimistic in thinking that we will be able to award 17 new awards for 17 overseas centers. But that number, again, is an estimate because once we get the results of the competition in and we look at the budgets for very competitive application, it would not be prudent for us to cut the budget of an applicant whose budget is airtight, that the objectives of the project and the goals and everything that they have described in the application is prudent, it's sound, it responds to all of the selection criteria in an exemplary way. It would not be prudent of the department or for the department to cut the budget just to reach 17 centers. So in a case like that, that particular budget would be recommended at the requested level, which means we would be able to fund maybe 14 or 13 new centers. So again, my point is all of the information in a notice in that funding section are estimates except for the available funds. The available funds is absolutely established at $1 million. The other numbers are estimates. The American Overseas Research Center does not require cost sharing or matching. This is not the same thing as the eligibility requirement that you have to have 50% of your funding coming from other public or private sources. So that's different from that. The cost sharing or matching means that for every dollar that we give you or award, that you would have to match that dollar. This is not that type of program. The program does not allow sub-grantees or sub-awardees. So when the department funds the grant application, all of the activities in that scope of work, we expect the applicant to carry out that scope of work. You you are prohibited from awarding any of this activity out to another sub-awardee or a sub-grantee. Intergovernmental review is in the notice. That means that you are going to provide a courtesy copy to your state point of contact based on the state in which the institution's, the center's executive or administrative office resides. For example, the West Africa Research Center, the home institution is Boston University. So for intergovernmental review, WARA would send a courtesy copy to the state point of contact that's listed for the state of Massachusetts. Not all states will have a state point of contact. If that is the case, you would just indicate in your 424 form that there is not a state point of contact. But the fact that the program falls under the executive order, there should be an effort made, if you have a state point of contact, to submit a courtesy copy to the state point of contact within that time frame listed in the notice. It has no bearing on the competitive peer review process whatsoever. The recommended page limit for the application project narrative is 30 pages. I emphasize the word recommended because the department is no longer required or allowed to be prescriptive in page limitations. This became effective when Secretary DeVos became Secretary of Education in 2016. A lot of the regulatory requirements that had been previously implemented for competitions are no longer in place. So that is why you will see in notices, not only in the AORC notice, but in other grant competition notices that come from the department and out of the Office of International and Foreign Language Education, you will see the terminology of recommended or recommendation or suggested or suggestions. That kind of language is incorporated throughout these notices because we are emphasizing the fact that we are no longer being prescriptive. So the recommended page limit for the AORC narrative, the section where you respond to the criteria, is 30 pages. If you have 30 pages and a half or 31 pages, the application will not be disqualified. We will read the application, so don't be constrained by that. Double space all text in the application narrative except titles, headings, footnotes, quotations, references, and captions, as well as all text and charts, tables, figures, and graphs. In other words, do not double space those. You do not have to double space those parts of the application narrative text. You have a choice of 4 fonts. You can use Times New Roman, Times New Roman, Courier, Courier New, or Arial. Again, your font options are Times New Roman, courier, courier new, or aerial. And again, the recommended 30-page limit is applicable to the entirety of the section that responds to the selection criteria, often called the program, project narrative, or application narrative. What is the application narrative? Again, the application or project narrative is part 3 of the application where you, the applicant, address the selection criteria that reviewers use to evaluate the application. The AORC program selection criteria are from the statute. This program is unique in a lot of ways, and one of them is that it does not have program-specific selection criteria. From the very beginning of the program, when it was authorized in the mid-90s, there was never program-specific criteria as you would have for other programs under Title VI or Fulbright-Hays. So we rely on the statute itself. In your narrative, you are telling us how the Overseas Center promotes postgraduate research, area studies, and exchanges. And then because we don't have, or we, I'm using we as in AORC, because AORC does not have program-specific regulations, we take selection criteria from the Education Department General Administrative Regulations, EDGAR, in Part 3475-210. So we have to go through EDGAR, pick out selection criteria that are most applicable to this program. If you look at EDGAR 75-210, it's a menu of well over 30 or 40 selection criteria that programs have the option of using for their programs. So for the AORC program for fiscal year 2020, these are the criteria that we selected that best fit the American Overseas Research Center program narrative. The first criterion is the program purpose. Again, it's taken directly from the legislation. So you need to describe how the proposed activities for your center, whether the center is in Bangladesh or Turkey or West Africa or Latin America or Eastern Europe or Sri Lanka, wherever the center is, your discussion should tell the readers that what you are proposing does promote postgraduate research, exchanges, and area studies. Selection criterion B is the need for the project, and this is worth 10 points, and the up to 10 points is guided by our Office of the General Counsel. That kind of language suggests that it's not 20 points that you automatically get for the criterion, or it's not automatically 10 points that you get. It's suggesting or letting the applicant know that in the peer review process, the reader has the discretion to award up to 20 points or the 20 points. But this is the legal side of a notice. So obviously you can be given 20 points for the program purpose. You can be given 10 points for need for the project, but you can also get up to that 10 points. Anyway, the need for the project. The need for the project takes into consideration the magnitude of the need for the services to be provided or the activities to be carried out by the proposed project. So when you think about magnitude, it's the greatness of it, the extensiveness of it. So as you look at what your center is proposing, what is the level of the greatness, what is the magnitude of your response to the need for the project? What is the gap that you're trying to fulfill through the activities and the scholarly efforts and initiatives of the center, the magnitude of the need? How have you determined that there is a need for more scholarship on Palestine? There is a need for more scholarship on Sri Lanka. There is a need for a better understanding of the geopolitical situations in the part of the world where your center is located. So this is the strength of this particular criterion, the magnitude of the need for the services to be provided or the activities to be carried out by the proposed project. It's not that you need money to operate your center. That is not a very strong and compelling response to this criterion. It goes well beyond that to tell the readers that there needs to be experts on these areas. We need to get more information out into the public sphere about political situations affecting these areas, et cetera. So that's what the magnitude of the need for the services to be provided or the activities to be carried out by the proposed project means. Another thing that you can consider in responding to the need for the project, talk about what incentives exist through your center that will compel scholars from the U.S. to come to the center to do their postgraduate research. How are you filling that gap? Selection criterion C, quality of the project design, up to 10 points. The extent of the first factor, the extent to which the goals, objectives, and outcomes to be achieved by the proposed project are clearly specified and measurable. So this speaks to the homework that you've done in preparation for this proposal, in preparing this proposal. You need to have a clear vision for what this project is going to do so you can tell the readers that the objectives, we've thought about this, the goals are very clear, the outcomes or the impacts, what you intend for this project to achieve at the end of 4 years, that's summative, or throughout the 4 years, formative. You need to be very clear to the readers that you have indeed done your homework to clearly specify what you're going to do and how you're going to measure it. You also need to speak to how the activities constitute a very coherent and sustained program of training in the field. It's not something that's ad hoc or put together. We might do this in year 1, and then we're going to shift to something different in year 2, and then something, again, different in year 3, and so forth. Your whole plan needs to hold together cohesively. The activities that you propose in each of the years should build upon and supplement and hold together throughout all 4 years of the project. Of course, you can have a different conference every year, but the overarching cohesiveness of the scholarship that's being conveyed and disseminated through those conferences should really feed back up to an overarching goal of the center. And then the last factor under quality of the project design is the extent to which fellowship recipients or other project participants are to be selected on the basis of academic excellence. Many of the overseas centers do offer fellowships to postgraduate researchers. You conduct your own competitions. You select these scholars who are heading your way to do a variety of research activities, topics, and themes. So you need to discuss that this whole process is based on academic excellence. And again, the AORC program is part of the Title VI mission, which is to train experts, to produce expertise in area studies. So this speaks to that overall mission for the program for Title VI overall, which is expertise. So as an American Overseas Research Center, you also have a role in Title VI, producing experts, producing knowledge, producing scholarship, and it's based on the very best of the best. So for this particular factor, you need to talk about how the researchers or the faculty fellows that you select, that it's done on the base of academic excellence. Project services, 20 points are available, and the first factor is the quality and sufficiency of strategies for ensuring equal access and treatment for eligible project participants who are members of groups that have traditionally been underrepresented based on color, national origin, gender, age, or disability. And this criterion speaks to the JIPA requirements for all of government federal programs. So we're talking about how does the center assure that your strategies for ensuring equal access are of high quality and they are sufficient for you to be able to address the needs of these particular groups. I suggest that you can do it at two levels. You can do it at the level of the membership institutions of the center and at the center level. It will strengthen the application or strengthen this particular narrative if you can speak to the fact that all of the member institutions that comprise the center have very robust, very sincere, intentional policies and strategies in place at the institution, not at the institutional level, that ensures these things. And then, in addition to that, the Overseas Center itself follows these particular strategies, has quality and sufficient strategies in place as you function overseas, that you're also very aware of the need for ensuring equal access for project participants who are parts of these groups. So, excuse me, so again, you can address this on two levels. At the institutional membership level, you can also address it at the Overseas Research Center level. Very often I have noticed in past competitions or previous competitions, not only for this program, but in all of the programs that we have this access criterion, it's an area where applicants tend to gloss over it and not give it the due diligence that it needs to be given to convey that you understand the importance of equal access for these target groups. So it's worth 20 points, so that tells you the emphasis that, that the department places upon this criterion. In addition, for this particular criterion, you're going to talk about the extent to which the services to be provided by the proposed project are appropriate to the needs of the intended recipients or beneficiaries of those services. Now, this is not speaking to the target groups in Factor 1. This is moving away from that and looking at everybody that's going to be participating in the center activities. So you want to talk about that what you're going to do is appropriate to the needs of the intended recipients. So if your intended recipients are researchers, then talk about the services that you're going to provide to them and that they are appropriate to researchers. If your intended recipients are faculty from minority-serving institutions, every year we're going to have 5 faculty from 5 institutions come to the center, or we're going to meet with them in the States. Whatever you're going to propose, is it appropriate to a minority-serving institution's faculty's needs? Are you going to be working with community college faculty? Is what you're proposing in your application appropriate to a community college faculty person's needs? So are you going to be working with groups of students who are coming over? For example, it could be that you are going to help host a group project abroad under the Fulbright Hays program. What you're planning to do with those particular students, is it appropriate to the needs of that group? So it's all about scale. It's all about appropriateness and meeting the needs of the persons that you expect to be serving over the next 4 years. Criterion E, quality of project personnel, up to 15 points. The extent to which the applicant encourages applications for employment from persons who are members of groups that have traditionally been underrepresented based on race, color, national origin, gender, age, or disability. Now, when we saw this particular language in the previous criterion, it spoke about access and the quality of the strategies that you have in place to ensure access. This particular factor is asking about the extent to which you encourage applicants for actual employment. So you're moving the needle from just letting them know, yes, you have access to our programs, to a different place. Yes, we employ persons who are members of groups that have been traditionally underrepresented based on race, color, national origin, gender, age, or disability. So you would speak to your employment record as far as the overseas center and the persons who are working either at the center or at your home office here in the United States. The criterion does not, it's silent on where that employment happens, but it's under your purview as an applicant to speak to employment of persons from these particular groups. Again, you're moving from access in your response to actual employment of these underrepresented groups. The second factor under this quality of personnel, let me back up. Yeah, quality of project personnel. You are taking into consideration that the qualities, including relevant training and experience of key project personnel. So the persons that you have in place already, or the persons you are considering for key personnel positions of the center, you're looking at how relevant is their training and experience to what you propose in the application. You're also looking at the time commitments of the project director and other key project personnel. Are they appropriate and adequate to meet the objectives of the proposed project? That does not suggest that the project director has to be 100%. It might be a need for a project director for 100% at one center, but 40% or 60% is appropriate and adequate for another center. So it's all relative, but you need to make the case that what you see in this budget as far as time commitment, it is absolutely appropriate and adequate to carry out the scope of work and to meet the objectives of the proposed project. Criterion F, adequacy of resources, up to 10 points. When you're developing your budget for your center for all years, first year, second, third, and fourth, look at the budget as you develop it to see whether it is adequate to support the proposed project. Now, adequate to me suggests something, it'll do, but I would not, I would go further than that to say it truly meets the needs. This budget is scaled perfectly to help us get done what we need to get done over the course of the time that we are given to get it done. So you're looking at the number of trips for faculty to come to the center. You're developing a budget based on the number of professional conferences that are adequate to get the scholarly information out to the public. The budget is adequate or more than adequate to convene your researchers once or twice a year at the center. So you have to be detailed enough to say this budget is airtight. It does support what we need to get done. It does provide us enough money to continue to do our digital archiving. It does provide enough support for us to produce these publications. Whatever the case might be for you, the key is to develop a budget and present it in such a way that a reader will say, this will get done what needs to get done in a very cost-effective and adequate way. You're also taking into consideration when you think about your resources is the adequacy of support, including facilities, equipment, supplies, and other resources from the applicant organization or lead applicant organization. Now, again, I want to go back to my comments that I mentioned at the outset, that these criteria are taken from the Education Department menu or smorgasbord of selection criteria. And they're written in such a way that a program in the Office of Elementary Secondary Education could use this criterion. It's written so that an office, a program in the Office of Career and Technical and Education Programs can select this criterion. It's written so that any program can just kind of take this particular general criterion and use it. So when we look at applicant organization or lead applicant organization, in the context of the American Overseas Research Center's program, I would consider the applicant organization to be the center. So when you're discussing your adequacy of resources, you are talking about the adequacy of support, including your facilities, the facilities at the center, the supplies that are available at the center, and other resources from the applicant organization. And I would just plug in from the applicant overseas center. I would not necessarily lead applicant organization is not really applicable or, for this program. So focus on applicant organization as the overseas center itself, because you do not have a lead applicant organization under this program. I hope that's clear, and if it isn't, feel free to follow up with me. But the applicant organization in the context of this criterion is the Overseas Research Center itself, because you do not have a lead applicant organization. Criterion G, quality of the project evaluation, up to 15 points. And it's asking you to take into consideration a number of things. And the first factor are the methods of evaluation. Are they appropriate to the context within which the project operates? So there are different kinds of evaluation methods. You can conduct, is your project more appropriate for an impact evaluation? Is it more appropriate for an outcome evaluation? Is it appropriate for a process or implementation assessment? In other words, how the project or service is to be delivered? Or is it more appropriate just to do a formative evaluation as the project is ongoing? You're taking stock of what you're doing as you go along. That's a formative evaluation. The other option or type of evaluation method would be summative. So you're going to just do these things, move the needle gradually, or however your timeline is for certain activities. You're going to move, and then at the end of the year, of the first year, you're going to take a look at what you've done in a summative way. So this particular criterion is asking you what methods of evaluation have you decided to use, and are they appropriate to the scope of work that you're going to be doing. An impact evaluation would be if your overseas center focuses heavily on working with postgraduate researchers or archivists, or bringing people over and making these services available to them, and you would design an evaluation that shows that what you do as an overseas center, excuse me, as an overseas center has a major impact not only on what they are doing while they are at the overseas center, but what impact has it had on their trajectory as a scholar, as a faculty person. Have they been able to get placements in an academic institution? Have they moved into diplomacy? Whatever the next phase of their academic experience or career experience, can they look back and say, if it wasn't for what the American Overseas Research Center in X did for me, I would not be able to be where I am. So that's an impact evaluation, that you have methods in place that can inform that kind of outcome. That if it wasn't for you and what you do, and you meaning the center, it would not have had this kind of impact on the recipients or the scholars or participants that are engaging with the center. The next factor under the quality of the project evaluation is the methods of evaluation are thorough, feasible, and this word again, appropriate to the goals, objectives, and outcomes of the proposed project. So you want to be thorough in your methods. They're not half-baked. You've thought them through, and that this represents what you're discussing in your response to this particular criterion clearly represents that the methods are thorough, they're complete, they are feasible. It's within reach. It's within the scope. You'll be able to do this. It's feasible, and it's appropriate for your particular center. And your evaluation should be a part of your project planning and not an afterthought. So these things are really built into the everyday thinking and development of the center, what you know from historically what you're able to do, and how you incorporate that and bringing it into this particular application. There has been careful planning, and that it's thorough, and what you're presenting is feasible, and it's appropriate to your particular goals, your particular objectives, and your particular outcomes. And evaluation should be really a learning experience and for improvement purposes, as well as for accountability purposes. So evaluation is informative, and it also helps you to be accountable for what your project is proposing and will be conducting. The next criterion factor under evaluation is that the methods of evaluation will provide timely guidance for quality assurance. So timely means you don't want to get a year and a half down the road and you figure out that I don't think we should have gone in this direction. That's not timely. So your evaluation plan should have room for you to do some self-checking and self-reflecting upon what you're doing, so you have enough time to make the adjustments that need to be made to ensure that the quality of the project has not been compromised. So that's what this particular criterion factor means, that the methods will provide timely guidance for quality assurance. And in a lot of environments, quality assurance also means risk assessment. So you have enough information along the way that you can step back and say, we need to make some adjustments, or we're at risk of not getting to where we need to be, or we're at risk at spinning our wheels unnecessarily. We are at risk at not being good stewards of these federal dollars. So this is what this particular factor means, that the methods of evaluation will give you enough time to recalibrate, to rethink things, and to keep the project going in a positive direction. This part of the webinar will talk about we're moving away from the NIA parts of the competition and what is set forth in the notice inviting application to the other parts of the application package, and which is one of them is the project abstract. So the project abstract is not scored, but it's important because when the peer reviewer opens up this electronic application and is reading remotely, the project abstract is what will introduce that reader to your overseas center and the activities that you are proposing to undertake over the next 4 years. It should clearly describe how the proposed activities are consistent with the AORC program purpose and the invitational priorities. So in the orientation that we provide the peer reviewers, we will ask them to look for your response to the invitational priorities, not to score them. They're not looking for information that's going to be scored, but they're looking for information to see how you have taken the leading of the department and nudging you to take a look at these particular invitational priorities. So in the project abstract, you should include information to say, the department invited us to take a look at these 2 areas. So within that abstract, you should describe what it is that you are setting forth in the application to respond to the invitational priorities. And the abstract should also present a compelling justification as to the project's merit and potential impact. Again, the AORC program sits in a very, I won't say awkward place in the legislation, but it's in a position where it's abstract in that the readers don't see or know that this about a center in Sri Lanka. They don't actually have the opportunity to see or to visit the center in Bangladesh or Afghanistan or in the South Caucasus or in Latin America. So the onus is upon you to give them a compelling justification as to why your particular project, your particular center merits consideration. And you need to talk about how your particular center will have a potential impact on area studies, on postgraduate research, on the ability of the United States to do these exchanges and send scholars to the center. And I don't want to mislead you to think that we don't have area studies experts that read the AORC program applications. We do. The same kind of diligence and attention to getting the best minds and scholarship and area studies and regional experts that we do for all of the other Title VI programs. We're very intentional. I am very intentional about getting people seated on these panels to read the American Overseas Research Center's proposals also. But my point is that in most cases, they have a better or connection to, I can go to the University of Pennsylvania and visit their East Asian Studies Center, or I can go to the University of Arizona and meet with the people at the Middle East Center. It's more tangible at the institutional level. It's less tangible for them to relate to an overseas center. So you really have to make the case that although they understand Middle East studies, they may not have the opportunity to go to ERIT or to Ames or any of the other Middle East centers or the centers in South Asia or Southeast Asia. So my point is you really have to convince them, let them know that what you have to offer, regardless of where your center is situated, that it merits their attention, that the United States itself merits funding these centers because they are important just as the other Title VI programs are, and promoting understanding, promoting area studies, promoting these studies, area studies, regardless of where you are situated. And as far as the project abstract, you can follow up to these comments that I'm making about the abstract on page 31 of the application package. Another piece of the application is your budget, and the budget has two sections. It has the education form ED524. That is the form that has the actual grid with each of these categories: personnel, fringe benefits, travel, supplies, contractual, other. There's a line for the total direct costs. There's a line for indirect costs, which are capped at 8%. The AORC program is a training grant, and for the U.S. Department of Education, all training grants have a capped indirect cost of 8%. And then on that 524 form, there is a cell for you to put the total cost for each of those years. So you have these categories that run down the left-hand side of that form, and then you have columns that go out to the right where you put in your requested budget for year 1, your requested budget for year 2, your requested budget for year 3, and your requested budget for year 4. And then there's a final extension column that totals the amount in each of those line item categories. And for each of the 4 years of the AORC project, the budget period for these grants run from October 1 of one year to September 30th of the following year. So the first year budget for you would be October 1, 2020 through September 30th of 2021. And then you would just follow out those other budget years using that calendar. And the budget years are on page 28 of the application guidelines. And the actual fleshed out descriptions of these costs or these categories are on pages 32 through 34. And it gives you the definition of supplies. For the Department of Supply is any item that has a unit cost, a unit purchase cost of less than $5,000. So you have a lot of, in other words, you have a lot of flexibility in the supply line, and you have a lot of flexibility in, oh, there's a, I just noticed, there's a line that's missing. There's an equipment in the list on this slide. The equipment line is missing. I just noticed that, but equipment is an allowable cost under this program. So I will correct that before the web is posted, but please know that you are allowed equipment costs under the program. So it should be personnel, fringe, travel, supplies, equipment, contractual, other, total direct costs, indirect costs, and then your total cost. Another component of this application is the performance measure form. We implemented it over 4 years ago to capture information about your project goals, performance measures, and your activities. Now, a full performance measure form has other sections in it, but for purposes of applying for the program, we are asking you only to provide these 3 bulleted areas: your project goals, the performance measures, and the activities. We will request completed PMF if the application is recommended for funding. And by completed PMF, that means you would then add in your targets. You would add in your targets and baseline data. Okay, so we're asking you to do the goals, the performance measures, and the activities. If you're recommended for funding, you would then add in your data indicators, the frequency that you would be collecting that data, and baselines and targets. But again, for sake of timing, we did not want applicants to spend a lot of time on those particular parts of the PMF, but you would just submit in the application the project goals, the performance measures, and the activities. And again, you can find additional information about the PMFs on page 34 and then pages 41 to 44 of the application. So in your project goals, you can have a minimum of 3, a maximum of 5. In the application booklet, we just for example's sake put in 2, but you are allowed to submit a minimum of 3, maximum of 5 project goals, performance measures for each of your goals, minimum of 1, maximum of 3, and then for each of your performance measure activities, you can insert a minimum of 1, max 3. And then the last piece of the application, so we've gone through the project narrative, which responds to the selection criteria. Then you have your budget piece, which includes the ED 524 form and the actual fleshed out detailed budget, which is Summary Budget C. And then you have your performance measure form. And then the application concludes with these appendices. The curriculum vitae and position descriptions. If you know the key personnel that are in place and that will be leading the project, and already you have those persons in mind, please submit the curriculum vitae for those individuals. If you know that you have certain positions that are necessary to carry out the scope of the project, but you are going to be hiring them after you find out if you receive this grant, then put in the position description. Maybe you have a position for an archivist, but you have not hired that person. So you would put in the position description for an archivist, or position description for a for an admin person for the overseas center. So any position that you know is necessary and integral to the scope of the project, but you have not hired those persons, just insert the position descriptions. Another required appendix is the list of U.S. institutions of higher ed that comprise the center. This speaks to the eligibility requirements in the log, which is labeled as limitations. The limitations for applicants under this program means that they have to be consortia of institutions of higher ed. So for us to see that and to validate that, we ask that you include the list of U.S. IHEs that comprise the center. A lot of lists also include other entities, but the main thing that we're looking for is your institutional members. There is in the application booklet a Word form that is called the AORC Program Eligibility Statement. We would like that to be uploaded to the application as part of the other attachments, and that it says that, yes, we are a consortium. Yes, we receive more than 50% of our resources from other public and private sources. And yes, we are a 501c3 IRS tax exempt. So we need to have that statement signed and included. And in the appendix, you would include your Section C budget narrative. That's the actual detailed budget that explains all of the categories that are listed on the 524 form. You have the personnel, the fringe, travel, supplies, etc. Your Section C budget is the fuller details about those particular categories. And then also in the appendices, you would include the performance measure form with your goals, your objectives, and your activities. Optional are letters of support. They are not required, but please feel free to include them. There isn't a set number because, again, we are kind of deregulating ourselves, so feel free to submit any number of letters of support that you feel will enhance your application. As far as how you submit the grant application, we all have the same understanding by now that you must submit your application using grants.gov, the apply site on grants.gov, unless you have received a waiver through the online submission process. And your application must be fully uploaded and submitted and must be date and time stamped by grants.gov before 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. You may recall 4 years ago, it used to be 4:30 p.m. Washington, D.C. time, but that has since changed. You have a longer time on the deadline date, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. But again, obviously you do not want to wait until March 27th to try to upload your application, because one can never know the amount of traffic on grants.gov. You don't want to encounter any glitches at the last moment that will prevent you from submitting. So please try to get your application in at least a week ahead of the 27th, so which would be the 20th. That way, if you submit your application on the 20th, and then you're going back through it, you say, oh, I forgot to include this section, or I want to say it a little differently, then you have time to submit another application, because grants.gov will allow you to submit more than one application. The latest application obviously is the one that will show in the queue when you submitted it, and that will be the one that we retrieved for the panel review process. So again, don't wait until the last minute, but give yourself sufficient time to submit the application in case you have need to submit another application and to replace the one that you've submitted, and to avoid any technical glitches that might happen. As far as the federal forms that are included on the application or with the application, these are on the grants.gov site. That's why they were not included as documents in the actual application package. You will need to submit the application for federal assistance, which is the SF-424 form. That's the form where you tell us who you are, and there's a lot of check boxes on the form that you need to complete, the amount of funding that you're requesting. That the 424 form includes the official contact information on behalf of the grant, etc. If you have questions about any part of the 424 form, please do not hesitate to reach out to me, and I can walk you through the 424 form. In addition to the 424 form, you have to submit a supplemental information form, which is the supplemental information form for the SF-424. That's the exact title that's on it. And it's important to fill this form out, especially if you are fortunate to be recommended for funding. That is the information that we use to get to you directly. That is the information we use to set up the grant in G5. That is the information we use to set the grant up in IRIS. So please submit the supplemental form in addition to the SF-424 form. The General Education Provision Act form, responds to Section 427. Again, that is the form that is your statement. It's usually the formal statement from the center that talks about equal access and how you treat people from underrepresented groups. And that's not to replace your responses within the project narrative. It is in addition to those responses. And then you have the assurances for non-construction programs, SF424B. And then the lobbying form, it was formerly designated as that particular number 80013, but it is on grants.gov, or it should be, hopefully. And then there's also the disclosure of lobbying activities, which is the SFLLL. So for the disclosure, of course, we understand that none of the overseas centers conducts lobbying activities, so there's really nothing to fill out on the form. It's just that you need to submit it for compliance purposes. So you would just indicate on there, not applicable, but still submit it, please. An overview of how things proceed once the applications are received on March 27th. We will seat remote peer review panels. They will review the panel of your applications online with the assistance of me and colleagues here who will serve as panel review monitors. After a thorough orientation provided for the readers as well as my colleagues, we will conduct the online peer review April 20th through May 4th. And what that looks like is that we schedule regular calls with the peer reviewers, and they are assigned, when the applications are received, they are randomly assigned to peer reviewers, and we discuss those applications every day. For example, if they have 10 applications to read, they will be assigned a workload to discuss maybe 2 a day or 3. So they have to be well prepared based on the orientation that we provide. And I will say, okay, tomorrow at 2 o'clock, we will meet for an hour and a half to go through the first 2 applications on your list. And that's how all of the program managers or monitors, panel review monitors, that is how we proceed here in IFLE. For all of our grant programs, we schedule these one-on-one, panel-to-panel, panel-to-project monitor sessions with the reviewers to go through each application. Every criterion is discussed. That gives me and my colleagues an understanding that they know what they're looking for when they're reviewing these applications, and that they are applying the rubric for the points to each criterion effectively and appropriately. We ask them to be very clear in their comments, to provide comments for every factor, every criterion, and every sub-factor, so that when you receive your technical review forms, you have a pretty clear and comprehensive understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of the application. So that whole process is done April 20th through May 4th. It is expected that we will have 3 review panels, each panel including 2 readers that are subject matter experts. Again, we are estimating a total of 17 awards, up from 10 for the past couple of cycles. It was kind of frozen at 10 centers. I'm hoping to get up to 17, but again, as I mentioned in the discussion of the budget and the competitiveness of this, we will not slash or, reduce a budget just for the sake of reaching 17 centers. We will be very prudent in how we rank these and how we look at the budget reviews, and hopefully my goal is certainly to have more than 10 centers, but it may not be as high as 17. It all depends on what you and your peers submit in the application. And we hope to make notifications to successful and unsuccessful applicants by June 30th. The department has gone to an accelerated schedule to make all grant awards to the extent possible well before September 30th. The administration, that's one of their priorities, to get grants awarded before September 30th, before the end of the fiscal year. So in the case of AORC, we hope to get notifications to you by June 30th. If you have any questions or any clarifications that are required, please do not hesitate to contact me. My email address is Cheryl, and that's Cheryl with a C, CHERYL.Gibbs, GIBBS, @ed.gov. My direct number is 202-453-5690. This concludes the webinar, and I wish everyone best wishes for success in the fiscal year 2020 American Overseas Research Center competition. These centers are extremely important in area studies. They are extremely important in the whole realm of Title VI international education, and I look forward to receiving your applications. Take care.